What do a lobbyist for big tobacco, an operative pushing Israeli propaganda, and a former candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada have in common? They all raised money for Mayor Soraya Martinez Ferrada's party, Ensemble Montréal. Ensemble recently published its annual report on the City of Montreal's website. In it are the names of 191 people authorized to raise money on behalf of the party. Mostly, these are candidates and their staff. But if you look closer, you see who the mayor's power brokers are. The people, in other words, who can be counted on to bring their network of donors and political connections to the table. People like Joshua Wolf, regional director at CJPAC, the Canadian Jewish Political Affairs Committee. Here he is on a podcast just ahead of the election.
And obviously, if you go downtown on the wrong day, it still does come to be true that you could find yourself in the middle of a very anti-Semitic, pro-Hamas demonstration.
To conflate opposition to the genocide with support for Hamas and hatred of the Jewish people, this is straight out of the Israeli propaganda playbook. And this guy, Joshua Wolf, has a direct line to the mayor's office, which is normal when you raise money for the mayor's party. Also included on the list are people like Agop Everlekian, who was chief of staff to former Mayor Gerald Tremblay. For those of you who are too young to remember Tremblay, he resigned in 2012 amid allegations that he looked the other way while his party fundraised illegally. His right-hand man, Michael Applebaum, served a prison sentence for accepting bribes from real estate developers while in office. Everlekian, for the record, also ran for the Conservatives during the 2011 federal election. The deeper you look into Ensemble's power brokers, the more you see a pattern emerge. Lobbyists with ties to real estate developers and the city's business elite. The wealthiest people in Montreal have a seat at the table, which isn't immoral or illegal, but do the most vulnerable people also have a voice inside Ensemble Montréal? Let's get into it.
So you've covered a lot of mayoral administrations. How have the people of influence changed comparing the current administration to previous ones?
I'm so glad you asked that question. So some very major things happened in between. Okay, the first thing we need to know is that the party of Soraya Martinez Ferrada, well, she inherited that from Denis Coderre. That used to be his political party. And Denis Coderre inherited that from Gerald Tremblay. It was Gerald Tremblay's political party called Union Montreal. This was the party of corruption. The Charbonneau Commission into corruption in political fundraising, it started largely because of reporting on Union Montreal. So that, you had the chief fundraiser for Union Montreal was this guy, Bernard Trepanier. His nickname was Mr. 3% because, according to allegations by anti-corruption officers, he would demand 3% of the value of the engineering contracts he would give out, right? The city would give out. And so his role was extremely important. He would get these construction companies to the table. They would finance the party to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It got so out of hand that the Charbonneau Commission changed the way political fundraising is done in Quebec. You used to be able to raise like up $1,500, $2,000 per person, per donor during an election year. Now it's $100 to $200. That's how bad it got. So I think it's important to realize that none of this involved this current administration, but they inherited a system that was that rotated around corruption.
So you've mentioned this to me in the past, that the shift has been, instead of having big names in construction and that kind of corruption, it's shifted more to having people of influence who are more in real estate or have an ideological agenda. If you could expand on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, Union Montréal was the construction party, right? All the paving companies basically ran that party, right? They would come up to, they had what they called turnkey elections, where they'd say, look, we're going to give you all the money, you just give us the contracts. That fell apart after all the Charbonneau Commission, which isn't to say that our politics and our construction industries are squeaky clean, but it is not as bad as it was. So now what's happening is more that because of all of the tomfoolery during the corruption years, the donations are really low. So if anything, they depend more on fundraisers to go and get. You can't just get 10 or 15 people now. You got to get 100 people to donate. This party raised $700,000 for the last election, which is huge for a municipal election in Montreal. And they did that by tapping into people who know people. And those people are the business elite of this city. You have someone like the ideological side. You have someone like Joshua Wolf, who, is a frequent Liberal Party of Canada donor. He used to be a staffer for the Liberal Party of Quebec. So you have that political side covered. But then you've also got like the money people and the people who are constantly in contact with the business community. So you have Hugo Delorme. He is a lobbyist for Imperial Tobacco. He represents a medical placement agency that's like a numbered corporation. They have over 500 employees, mostly nurses, that they place across the province, which jacks the price of healthcare. He works with the pharmaceutical industry, with biotech, and with developers. Serge Paquette, another fundraiser for the party. He's part of something called Le Groupe Maurice. They build private elder care homes. These are people representing the moneyed interests in Montreal. These are people who, they just want to build, they want to deregulate, they want to get something out of this administration. It's not corrupt. It's just that they have a huge influence inside the party. And do ordinary people have a huge interest or a voice inside the party? And I think the answer is pretty clear. They don't.
Yeah, I don't think that none of those people are tenants, right? A lot of them are landlords. They profit off of the housing market being deregulated, off of skyrocketing rents. And then there's also the pro-Israel lobby that is shoehorned in there, despite the fact that, most Canadians are not supportive of.
Yeah. I mean, there was a poll by Leger in April 10th. And it found that only 17% of Quebecers have a favorable view of Israel. A majority of Canadians believe Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and only like 22% of Canadians have a favorable view of Israel. And yet, this administration bends over backwards not to criticize Israel. You saw just the other day, Ehab Latoyef is one of 3 Quebecers who are being held in Israel right now. Maybe by the time this airs, they'll be released, but they're being held in Israel, and people confronted the mayor about it at City Hall. There's footage of it on Instagram, and she was very, very careful to kind of say like, well, maybe we'll call the government and make sure it's okay, but I don't want Israel to think we're criticizing.
Yeah, and one of them's even works for McGill. Like.
Yeah. No. It's a very like it. Maybe it won't cost them anything right now, but there is a huge gap in between what their core beliefs are on this issue and what the core beliefs of most Quebecers, Canadians, and Montrealers are. And when you're that at odds on an issue that speaks to like your basic humanity, your basic view of like what a genocide is, who's suffering, who is the victim here, it doesn't bode well for them medium to long term. I mean, for now, it's not, I don't think it's on the forefront of everyone's mind, but it's the kind of thing that erodes people's confidence in you. So when you surround yourself with those people, you're just going to open yourself up to criticism that you're not doing enough for ordinary people. So another example is the 2020 bylaw. Back when Projet Montréal was in power, they had this bylaw that forced developers to include a certain number of social housing units and affordable housing in their projects, or they had to pay a fine. And they always chose to pay the fine, so it was kind of an ineffective law, although it built up millions of dollars for the city in fines that they can spend on social housing. It's not the same as building social housing. And so the mayor has gotten rid of that, which was like number 1 on the developers' demand list going into this election. So they already got what they wanted largely. And in fact, the city is going to be cooperating with 3 of the biggest developers in the city on a project to build social housing and affordable housing. It's something like 2,500 units. I think it would cost the government between $15 and $20 million a year to run. We'll see how it goes, but it's very rare that these public-private partnerships end up saving money, and it's very rare that they end up doing what they were intended to do. Mm-hmm. If anything, the taxpayers are guaranteeing the profits to these companies, and we're not exactly sure what the services will be in return. Because one of these guys on the list, Serge Paquette, his company was sued by hundreds of their tenants for not living up to their end of the bargain. They ended up having to give their tenants in these old age homes like massive discounts because they weren't getting the services. So there's no silver bullet here. They're obviously, like, I don't doubt that they're trying to do good, but they're also, their goal is to make money.
Right.
And that's sometimes can be at odds with like people living a decent life.
Yeah.
We'll see how it turns out.
We'll see. That's how politics in Montreal is one giant We'll see.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you don't like it's astounding to me, like how it's hard to describe how openly corrupt politics in Montreal were just like half of a generation ago. Like, that's why like this guy Egop Everleckian, like, sure, donate to the party, show up at a cocktail fundraiser. You're a voter. You get to represent who you want to represent. But do you want to associate yourself with the chief of staff of a mayor who resigned in disgrace, whose right-hand man ended up in prison? Many other people in his entourage, like Mr. 3%, Bernard Trepanier, the fundraiser. The only reason he's not in prison is because the charges against him were stayed because he had terminal cancer. But like, I remember going to those hearings, and the evidence was very strong, like wiretap recordings, handshake deals, all that kind of stuff. So like, that's not like, no one's saying this guy Egop did anything wrong, but like there is a perception issue of like, why are these guys still around? These guys were in politics at a time where they were super toxic.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a reminder that like candidates who present themselves as a kind of change candidate, it's very hard to claim that and then keep all these old hats around and be surrounded by these lobbyists and this money. Like, again, no one is saying anyone did anything illegal, and I'm saying this in part because they haven't gotten back to me with any of my questions yet. I haven't heard their side of the story, but it doesn't look great either.
Yeah, I mean, even though they put a cap on donations, right, it doesn't change the fact that if the cap is $150, a lot of the people I know can't pay that.
No.
And then you're whipping, a bunch of donors from elite class. So you're essentially crowdsourcing the money instead of one company giving you a huge chunk. You're still getting it from just a bunch of individual people. It's more work. Yeah. But it seems to me that the legislation makes it so it's a bit more of a laborious process, but the outcome is a little bit, it's similar, not the same. At the end of the day, you depend on these people. Yeah. Because like, this is not the United States. We don't have these insane expenses but you have to rent, you've got to buy food for your volunteers. You've got to pay some of your people. You have to rent campaign space. Like, this shit costs money. And they doubled, the fundraising hall of Projet Montréal, which I think is like a twofold thing. One, people weren't super enthusiastic about Projet, but two, they have a good, strong network that they've built up. And obviously, when these guys raise money for you, you're going to kind of owe them something. Even if you don't literally owe them something, they have access to you. They have a direct access to you that normal, ordinary, struggling citizens don't. So you always have to ask yourself, like, well, who has a voice in the administration? And like, the voice in the administration is the real estate industry, people who want deregulation, old political hands, liberal stalwarts, and ideologues whose beliefs are totally at odds with the majority of Canadians.